We are not short on topics on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Jake Allen, Cole Caufield, Jonathan Drouin, and how this team could look in the playoffs. It's all that and more on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Julian McKenzie back at it with the special panelists with me every week. Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette, Jessica Rusnak from CBC Daybreak Montreal, Rick Green, former NHL assistant coach and former Montreal Canadian. Jonathan Drouin is the first topic that we have to tackle here, and I just want this to be said ahead of any discussion on Jonathan Drouin here. We do not know the specifics on why he is taking this leave of absence, and I think it would be responsible if we speculated on any of that here. So we're going to try our best to not do that on the show. And I also just think that the fans who have taken this opportunity to kind of dump on him in light of what has happened, it's absolutely been shameful on the part of those fans. I just want to take that moment and just kind of say that. But the question on Jonathan Drouin that I would like to ask is, who do you think on this Montreal Canadiens team would benefit more with Jonathan Drouin being out of the lineup as long as it looks as if he'll be?
Well, I think it's Cole Caufield, because Drouin going out opens the door for Cole Caufield to come in after the Canadiens have been juggling with, salary cap and call-ups and everything else, and fans were talking more about money than they were talking about action on the ice or what would happen. So Cole Caufield, I think, this opened the door for him to get him in. They were able to call up Romanov off the taxi squad, their final call-up. So Caufield, I think, is the guy who's going to benefit the most from this, just because it opens up a job for him that wasn't there before.
And I think this would be a great opportunity for Arturi Lehkonen to maybe show what he can bring. He's a guy who's shown in the past that he can score some goals, but has been snake bit and has been a frustrating player to watch recently. But this would be a great opportunity. And also maybe even, Michael Frolik, as much as he's not in the squad. But hey, this might be his final year playing in the NHL. And if he can get a few more games and end a little bit on a high after just sort of practicing for the majority of the year, then, why not? That's a nice little added bonus for him.
And let me just start off by wishing Jonathan Drouin all the very best,
yes,
on whatever he has that's giving his problems. I mean, after being there before, it's a tough market here in Montreal. It's tougher on the Canadian born kids from the Montreal area, and my feelings go out to him, because obviously I think there's been a lot of things that have been going on that the public don't know about, but I'm happy to know that he's probably in very good hands, and he's going to be taken care of, and he's going to get his health back to where it should be so that he can carry on with his life, whatever that future holds for him. And as far as, the Canadiens and where they go with him out of the lineup, a guy that's averaging or was averaging around 16 minutes a game. I think judging by what we're seeing, there's certain players that are going to be given opportunity. I think that there's going to be time for experimenting on different combinations, and obviously those that warrant more ice time might end up stepping into that position, and the shuffling of the lines will probably continue until they find something that's really connecting on all fronts. And this is something that we'll probably see down the stretch, and it's probably a good time, as good a time as any, to experiment with certain individuals to see if they can complement each other and get back to the winning ways.
It's interesting, Jess, you mentioned Michael Frolik, because he must be going, hey, remember me? What about me? All this talk about who's going in, who's coming out. Hey, remember me over here? The guy that you signed in the offseason, the veteran player. Do I get a chance to play? So I'm happy for him that he did get an opportunity to get back in the lineup, because this is kudos to Michael Frolik for everything he's gone through this year. You watch him at practice. He works hard. He skates hard. He's last guy off the ice most times. So it's nice to see him at least get a chance to show what he can do. And as you mentioned, I mean, this could be the last kick at the can for him in the NHL. So he wants to at least be able to show what he can do, if not to the Canadiens, to some other teams who might be interested in picking him up in the offseason.
Just to go to, well, actually, before I get to the second question, Rick, good on you for extending that courteous word you mentioned towards Jonathan Drouin. I'm sure we all also wish the best for him going forward. Next question I wanted to ask you all is with regards to the schedule. if you're watching this, it's very likely Friday, and the Canadiens are going to play later on tonight. They're also going to be playing tomorrow, and I believe on Monday as well. They have at least like 8 games left in the season. They're going to be playing that from now till about May 12th. There's a lot of hockey still to be played. There's a lot of hockey that they've been playing over the last how many days. Do you think this brutal schedule is starting to wear down on the Montreal Canadiens? I mean, already they have to deal with the injuries they have to deal with right now. What about the fact that they are playing as frequently as they have?
I definitely think it has. Philip Deneau even said this is a shortened season, just 56 games, but it feels like it's more than 82 games with the travel, especially what happened with them having the COVID-19 outbreak so that they had to shut it down. So even more of a condensed schedule. They're pretty much playing every other day, and coming off that 5-game road trip in Alberta, they didn't have much time to rest and recover before the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. They arrived early Tuesday morning into Montreal, probably just slept the entire day, and then, hey, it's Wednesday, and you've got a game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But the players said they have to find a way to sort of bring that energy. Deneau also mentioned not having the fans in the building also kind of hurts. That sometimes that can be that boost, but it's hard to find that energy. It's not as easy as I think most people think. I think it is a little bit of a difficult situation too when you think about Jake Allen, that they're in the same sort of situation they have been in the past when Carey Price has not had a sustainable backup goaltender. Not saying that Caden Primo can't do the job, but he is an AHL goaltender. He is a rookie. He's not necessarily someone you want to rely on when you need to pick up these points right now. So they went down and got Jake Allen. So when they go through a stretch like this, they have 2 reliable goaltenders they can throw out there to give one the night off. And now, it's kind of come down to Jake Allen until we find out more about Carey Price.
And we have talked about how much of a grind this year is going to be. And, it's exactly that. There's just tons of games happening. And the results are there's guys that are getting injured because of fatigue and, a number of things that come into play. They just can't get themselves rested enough when they're playing at this high level each and every shift, let alone each and every game. And, Jake Allen, he's doing the best he can be, because I'm telling you, when you watch some of the games and some of the mistakes that are being made on the Canadiens' defensive side that, are leaving Allen, whether it's on a breakaway or sloppiness in the defensive zone, he has to be right on in order for him to allow the Canadiens to settle down and maybe get things going on the offensive side. But they can't continue to play in front of him and, make his workload what it is and expect that he's going to survive this, down the stretch. So hopefully they're going to try and, clean up some of those problem areas which are, playing not the smart way in the defensive zone that causes Jake Allen to become exhausted because he's getting battered by shots coming from all over the place.
Is the schedule tough? Yes. Is it hard playing with no fans? Yes. It's the same for every team in the league. The Canadian schedule is a little bit more difficult because of that delay they had because of the COVID, where some games got stacked up a little more than other teams, but it's going to be even harder for the Vancouver Canucks because they were off even longer because of COVID. I think the thing that's really hit the Canadiens harder than anything is the injury to Brendan Gallagher. For whatever reason, this team is not the same hockey team without Brendan Gallagher in the lineup. And Brendan Gallagher is not Connor McDavid. He's a great hockey player. He battles, but he's not a superstar NHL player. And I think it says a lot about this team that losing Brendan Gallagher, they can't score more than 2 goals a game. They don't seem to have any fire. There's nights they look like they didn't show up. Are they tired? Yeah, but somebody on the bench needs to rile them up. Corey Perry seems to be doing the one guy out there who seems to be trying to do that. But there's just, they can't score 2 goals. This is, without Brendan Gallagher in the lineup. And I think that says a lot about this team, and it's not good. Everybody knew this schedule was going to be tough when they came into it. Every team in the league. That's when Mark Bergevin went out and got so much depth. But that depth hasn't been getting the job done. And Brendan Gallagher, as I've said for a long time, is the heart and soul of this team. And if anybody ever doubted that, we know for sure now that he is.
If you want my thoughts on how much Brendan Gallagher means to this team, go back to last week's episode on that one. Also, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that this team just seems to struggle with scoring goals consistently, because it seems as if no one has suffered more as a result of that than Jake Allen, which off the top of my head, unfortunately, I do not have the exact number of goaltenders in front of him who have less goal support in front of him, but that number isn't necessarily that large. And I think Jake Allen, I think he's battled admirably in the net, and he's done some great things in the role that he's been thrust in as the 1B goaltender for this team. And I don't feel he's had too many off nights. I think the mistake he did in the Toronto Maple Leafs game where he made that bad clear leading to that goal scored, that's like the worst mistake he's done all year. How many times, like, be honest with yourselves here, how many times can you look at a game Jake Allen has had and said, man, he had a really bad night? I'm not saying Jake Allen has played all world in every single start that he's played, but I can't think of too many nights where Jake Allen has had himself like a bad night, or like all the goals were his fault or most of the goals were his fault, but the team in front of him could do way better to play in front of him, because Jake Allen's still providing some quality starts.
The backup goalie, all you want from your backup goalie is to give your team a chance to win. And he's given this team a chance to win every game he's been in the net. And when he hasn't played well, he's taken full responsibility for it. He hasn't looked for excuses. And there's not many games that he hasn't played well. There's maybe one, maybe two, if that. The goal that he screwed up at the end of that game against Toronto, I think you're right. This isn't exactly what Jake Allen signed up for. I thought he might, he wasn't expecting to play 10 out of 12 games or whatever it is now. But he's a battler. I've mentioned before on the show, he's Brendan Gallagher in goalie pads. He fights, he battles every night, and he gives his team a chance to win. Unfortunately, his team, Jake Allen can't score, unfortunately, and too many of his teammates can't score either.
Well, that's just it. When you are doing your best to stop the puck from going in, you need the help from your teammates to go out there and score some goals, give you a buffer. So it's not one goal is the only goal that's going to be scored that game. And that's kind of the position that Jake Allen is in, because no one is going out there and scoring many goals. And this has been a problem with the Canadiens, not just this season, that going back to last season, that finding the way to give themselves a little bit of a buffer in a game has been very difficult.
And what has impressed me the most about Allen is his timely saves. I mean, the Canadiens have breakdowns, and you're going, oh no, here we go. The momentum is going to shift to the opposition. But Allen is able to make key saves at the key times, and actually settle the team down somewhat to allow them to get their act going again. But he can't continue to deal with that type of play coming against him each and every night. But what he does do well, and again, aside from the other night, he does perform in clutch situations, and he deserves full credit for a job well done to date.
Yeah, just finish up this topic too. I think when you're a goalie, you go in net, and if you let in 2 goals, you're going to lose probably. It's got to put a lot more pressure on you.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the scoring woes. We've made that a point throughout many an episode on this show this particular season. We all like to think back to that first month of the year where it seemed as if the Canadiens were able to score at will. At one point, they were averaging like 4 goals a game. Like, it was unsustainable, but it was still remarkable and amazing to watch, especially for Canadiens fans. And now, as it looks as if they're going to go on a collision course with the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round of the playoffs, you have to wonder how this Canadiens team could find a way to get that offense back. I'll just say this before I leave the floor to everyone else here. Just off of some of the games they've played in the second half of their year, it kind of feels like the Canadiens' offensive system has just been kind of figured out. In the past, it seemed as if they were able to take advantage of all of these open spaces and go on all these different breaks. But I don't know if you've noticed in the Calgary game, and I think in Toronto they did this as well. It seems as if whenever the Canadiens are about to do like a breakout into the neutral zone, there is always an opposing player always ready to meet them, so no one is able to break. So the Canadiens need to figure out a way to kind of break through that defensive system. But of course, I'm not the genius here. There's a reason why I'm not a coach. So maybe you guys have some answers as to how the Montreal Canadiens can revive their offense when it comes time for them to play in the playoffs against Toronto.
Well, I would love to see the defense being really selective in helping out on the offense. I think, in previous games and earlier on in the year, I thought the defense were really, really intelligent in helping out on the offensive rush. And, against Toronto, and, Toronto doesn't have exactly one of the best defense in the league, but you can see they're very effective in helping out on the offensive side. And I think the Canadian defensemen are smart enough, and I've seen it in the past, that they can be selective in jumping in and creating stuff on the offensive side. And, I don't care if it's a high-powered Leafs. once you get into the playoffs, it's a whole different ball game. And I would just like to see the group back there, chipping in their part in contributing offensively and, making things happen on the offensive rush that I think is going to do them well when it comes to creating more chances and, getting, better quality chances on the offensive goalie.
I think if you go back to the start of the season, you got to remember this was a short training camp. There were no preseason games. The Habs had a lot of changes to their lineup, a lot of new players. It was almost like a new team. They caught other teams by surprise, I think, early. But there's video, and the coaching in the NHL will find ways to shut down different systems and different players. And I think that's what happened with the Canadiens. Other teams figured out how to shut them down, and nobody did that better than the Calgary Flames with Darryl Sutter. Watch those games. They neutralized the Canadiens. They made it almost impossible for them to get to the dirty areas. So a lot of players didn't want to go there, but it made it hard for them to get there to score goals. And I think, we're talking earlier about Brendan Gallagher being out. There's just not enough guys willing to go to the dirty areas. And the Canadiens have so many guys, so many forwards who work so hard. Arturi Leikkonen's an example. They create chances, but they just can't finish. They just can't score. Joel Armia, the other night against the Leafs, he gets a breakaway, hits the goalie right in the chest. They have too many guys at forwards who just can't score. And that puts so much pressure on Toffoli and Anderson and Gallagher. I mean, those three guys together have scored almost 40% of the Canadiens' goals this season. So I think it's a matter of other teams figuring out how to shut the Canadiens down, and the Canadiens just having too many forwards who can't score.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's too many people looking around for that same group of guys to go out there and get them a goal. And even Dominic Ducharme said after the game against Toronto that the team needs to find a way to finish because they had chances, especially in the first period against Toronto. And if they would have capitalized on some of those chances, maybe it would have swung the momentum of this game and it would have been a win instead of a loss for them. But it is interesting, like you mentioned, that you're only facing about the same teams over and over 10 or 11 times this season. It's getting pretty boring to watch.
Repetitive.
That other teams have been able to figure out the Montreal Canadiens system, but it just seems that the Canadiens coaching staff haven't been able to do the same with their own opponent, that there's been so many games. You look back to that 3-game series against Calgary, we spoke about just how important that was. And it seemed like Calgary was way more prepared for it than the Montreal Canadiens. So that has been, something that perhaps it goes onto the coaching staff as well of how have they been able to prepare their team.
We'll also factor in the fact they're getting almost no offense out of the center position. Look at the good teams in the NHL. Most of their offense comes down the middle, and the Canadiens just haven't been getting that.
And, really, we're in playoff mode right now. And, we mentioned about Gallagher. I mean, this is the type of player or ingredient that you're missing as a group there that's going to be effective in the playoffs. And, as much as you want to talk about his size, with a heart like that and a guy that stands in front of the nets, gets knocked down, he keeps kicking and scratching, he keeps finding ways to create things for his team. And more guys have to get into those dirty areas. And, we're just hoping that they're going to do it real soon as we count off these last number of games, because if they're going to be on the perimeter, we're seeing what's happening, that they're not going to score goals. So the ugly goals, and again, Brendan Gallagher doesn't get always the pretty goals. The ugly goals are going to be a big part, and they're going to be a big part of deciding the win and loss at the end of the day.
Rick, was there a little guy you used to play against who reminds you of Gallagher?
Actually, there was probably a long list, but it's a guy that probably drove me crazy was Terry O'Reilly.
Okay.
And he was a guy that he just wouldn't go away. He just, no matter what you did, he would come and chop you and hack you, and you just stand in there until it went off his head if he had to score. And he was a determined guy, and you know what you're going to get out of him, very similar to a Brendan Gallagher.
Thanks for letting me know of a player I will have to look up after this episode is over. Very quickly, guys.
Jonathan Drouin legend.
For sure. That's why I don't know it.
He wasn't that much fun to play against. But I'll tell you this about him. Much as he showed up in a lot of the fighting tapes, he he was as honest a player. So if you basically were in the corner and he took a run at you, he smashed your face against the glass. When you had the opportunity to give it back to him in the same way, everything was good. It's not like, okay, you can't hit me like that without me dropping my gloves, which I'm glad I didn't have to fight him.
Okay.
He was an honest player, and just a great guy. But anyways, quite an experience to play against the big Bruins back then.
Well, at least he could dish it and also take it. Very quickly before, just to end off this question here, I know we mentioned the Toronto Maple Leafs as a potential playoff opponent. We've all but penciled them in as the top seed. I mean, they already clinched a playoff spot. Do the Canadiens have any chance, if it gets to that point where they're in a playoff series against them, at getting any wins, at winning the series? Where do you rate their chances in the series against the Leafs?
It's going to depend who's healthy. I mean, if Gallagher's back, obviously their odds go up. If Carey Price is back, their odds go up. Price has struggled this season, but he showed last season in the postseason how he can play when he's rested, and he will be rested coming. Hopefully he recovers fully from this concussion that he has and can come back and play like he did last season in the postseason for the Canadiens. But if not, I mean, what we saw the other night, I think, is what we're going to see in the playoffs. The Leafs just have so much talent, so much offensive force, so many guys who can put the puck in the net. We were talking earlier about the Canadiens have too many guys who can't score. The Leafs have a lot of guys who can score. So I think if everybody's healthy on the Canadiens, they have a chance. But if they go into the playoffs without Price and without Gallagher, I think it's maybe a 5-game series.
It's too bad that this has to happen if this matchup does end up going during COVID, because I think the crowd would have been such a difference. The Bell Center in the playoffs can be such a hostile environment, and then you go to Toronto and you can hear a pin drop and you have no idea if it's a preseason game or I think that could have worked in the Canadiens' favor. But I don't know. I have a feeling that it won't necessarily be a walk in the park for the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Canadiens. I think they might put up a good fight against them. But I would think that Toronto would take that series.
Cole Caufield has finally played games in the National Hockey League. He's played 2. He's had some shots on net. He's run into a few people, including a ref, but he's playing National Hockey League games. What do you think of his performance so far?
Yeah, it was quite a hit from the ref there. I was worried he might have
Jeez.
a after that. He went down pretty hard.
Oh, my
His
God.
head down, didn't see the ref. But I think we need to cut this kid slack for a lot of reasons. First of all, never played a game in the NHL. He's 20 years old, and he went a long time without playing a game before he got to make his debut with the Canadiens. He was practicing. So you got to let him get his feet wet and get back into game action. I mean, Rick would know this. I mean, practicing with the team and playing a game are totally different things. The thing I noticed in that very first shift he had when he broke down the wing and fired that shot that just went over the net, that's Cole Caufield. That's how he comes advertised. You give him a chance to score. He's either going to score or he's going to get a good shot away. One thing that stood out at me maybe a little bit negatively is that he seems to be trying to make some moves that probably worked in the NCAA, and he's getting pushed on his butt by big defensemen like Rick Green, who are saying, "Don't try that on me, kid." So, we got to give this kid a little bit of slack. It's the hazardous situation. If they can clinch a playoff spot in the next couple of games, you got to play him and play him a lot and let him experience some different situations. The talent's obviously there. But making the jump from the NCAA to the NHL is not easy for anybody. I don't care if you want an Obie Baker Award or not. Look at the list of previous Obie Baker Award winners. There's a lot of guys you're going to go, who's that guy? Caufield has a talent, but cut the kid a little bit of slack and let's see what he can do moving forward.
Yeah, I have all the time in the world for Cole Caufield and to let him develop, let him to learn the NHL game. And like you said, what can work and what doesn't work at that level. He hasn't done anything that's been, putting his team at risk. So that's also a very good thing. He's got some shots on goal. He's trying to find his way into this game. I think some people maybe thought that he was going to come out and score a whole bunch of goals right away, but that would have been very rare if he was able to pull that off. I think it was Max Pacioretty on his first shift in his first game in the NHL that ended up scoring a goal, but that doesn't happen regularly. So just give this kid time, let him develop, and eventually the goals will come.
And I think he's handled himself very well. I mean, you had so much pressure on this kid for, what's he going to bring to the team? And he steps in there with a big smile on his face, and he's motoring around like he's one of the most excited guys in the world. And he backs that up with obvious talent. And I mean, if you watch where he goes, on the offensive side of things. He kind of disappears. And then all of a sudden, he's quicker than a lot of people think. He gets to those areas, and he's going to have many opportunities by just his great hockey sense and ability to find those soft spots, as we call them, that's going to allow him to release that great shot that he has. So, I mean, nothing but an upside with this type of kid, and what he's shown at such early stage is great, and hopefully he's going to get more opportunity because it's going to continue to develop and make him a real good player with the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, his speed's another thing that caught my eye, Rick. I mean, he's quicker than I thought, at least on the NHL ice surface. You notice him buzzing around out there, and you also notice him busting his butt on the back check and working hard coming back. And I heard on the radio the other day, our buddy Chris Nyland was interviewing Tony Granato, Caufield's coach at Wisconsin, and Granato was saying how Caufield wasn't ready to make the jump to the NHL after last season. But he said after this season, he learned how to play the 3 zones. He learned how to play better away from the puck, and he was confident that he's ready to play in the NHL now and also ready to have some success at the NHL level.
I'll mention 2 things here. One, and look, we all know how small he is, but just seeing him play on the NHL ice with some of these other bigger players, Caufield just looks so small out there. He's doing all the right stuff. He's doing as best as he can. Yeah, I'm with you, Stu. Cut him some slack. But just for whatever reason, just watching him play these games, you really get a sense of how small he is compared to everyone else on the Bell Center or whichever ice that they happen to be on. Also, Jess, to your point about goals just happening right away from a rookie player, what would Ryan Poehling say about what you just said? Stu, did you want to add something, Stu?
Yeah, I was going to say, talking about Caufield's size, I'm 6'3", and I was in Vancouver covering the draft when they drafted him, and when he came out to meet the media, he came up to like, I was like, oh my God, this kid is short. So, and I was really good. It was on The Athletic that Arpin Basu wrote, talking with Caufield's dad. And he said one of the mistakes Cole made in his debut is that during the national anthem, he stood between Weber and Sherratt. Don't stand beside those guys. Like, find a shorter guy to stand beside him.
Arpin's another tall guy, too.
But with his smarts, you look at him on the boards there, he's going to be a step ahead of some guys in getting to those areas and, being effective on the wall. I mean, we saw it a few times. Size was not an issue when he's quick and smart enough and keeps it simple. And, maybe that's not his strength, but obviously he's able to handle himself so far, and he's going to get better as he experiences what the NHL guys are like coming down the wall at him, outweighing him by 50 or 60 pounds. So he's good enough player that he'll understand what he needs to do and not do in a short time, I hope.
Yeah, he's been the smallest kid on the ice just about his whole hockey career. I'm sure he's to deal with it at every other level. And there's other examples in the NHL now. Johnny Gaudreau, Alex DeBrincat. There's other small guys his size who have figured out a way to play in the NHL. It's easier for those guys today than it would have been back in the days when Rick Green was on the blue line, cross-checking these little guys legally in the back and all the other
keep
stuff.
Bringing up Rick Green as an example.
Easier now than
survival.
I said legally cross-checking.
Yeah.
We could
do that then. We were allowed to do that.
Yeah, sure. By the way, Tony Granato was once asked about who are some actual NHL comparables to Cole Caufield. One of the 2 players he mentioned Cam Atkinson, and he mentioned Alex DeBrincat. Let's move to the final question here, where we talk about Tyler Toffoli and Josh Anderson, 2 marquee acquisitions from the Canadiens over the last offseason via trade and free agency and whatnot. And they've been really good. Tyler Toffoli scored over 20 goals this year. Looks as if he's going to be scoring 30 goals. Josh Anderson has been the power forward that this team has needed for quite some time. And if you look at his stats, I think he's got some good Cy Young numbers. If I recall correctly, he's got that 17-7. If I recall correctly, he's doing pretty well. He's doing okay. Where do you think this Montreal Canadiens team would be without those 2 players?
Without a lot less goals, if that's even possible.
Yes.
A team who's having a hard time finding the back of the net. They have been 2 instrumental players. And you look around and you say, okay, when you need a goal, it's either going to come from Josh Anderson or Tyler Toffoli. If you want to place a bet on something like that, that's a good one to put your bet on. They have been those players that have been able to be that spark plug with, especially with Brendan Gallagher being out right now. Josh Anderson, the way he played against Toronto, and when he spoke after the game as well, he said, yes, we were tired, but we had to find a way to overcome this. And it seemed like he tried to do everything, but just they weren't able to get the win in the end. But these two players have been so impactful, and this is the kind of thing that you need, especially from players that you go out. Josh Anderson to acquire, he was a huge question mark trading Max Domi for him. And if you look at the way Max Domi's season's going this year, that they've definitely won that side of the trade. But the Canadiens would be in trouble if they didn't have these two players in their lineup right now.
And those players combining for 42 goals I mean, that's not an easy task. And, if you look at their overall play each and every game, and I always mention about Anderson as a guy that's a catalyst, so to speak, because he's coming at you and he's playing hard and he's trying things and he's not that much fun to play against. And he's consistently done that since he's arrived. And, even though he's scored the 17 goals, he's still bringing a lot more to the team. And Toffoli, it's an obvious choice there in, hey, look, 25 goals. The guy finds a way. If he's not scoring every night, he's getting opportunities. He's creating things for his teammates. And he brings a lot in the overall game on the offensive side of things. And those two guys obviously are a huge, huge part of the Montreal Canadiens. They're going to have to continue doing what they're doing. But some of the other guys are going to have to pick up a little bit of the slack, to allow them to get to the next level.
Where would the Canadiens be without those two guys? Probably in last place in the North Division, especially.
You think they'd be last place? You think they'd be worse than the Senators?
Have been playing recently. They'd probably be behind Ottawa. Without them, they've scored two guys that have scored like 30% of the team's goals. This team would be in big trouble without those two guys in the lineup. Who else is going to score? And especially with Brendan Gallagher out of the lineup. But the thing I really like about those two guys also, as they say, if you're a 50 goal scorer in the NHL in a regular season, 82 game season, that means there's at least 32 games where you didn't score a goal. So what did you do in those 32 games that you didn't score? Well, the other night against the Leafs, Toffoli and Anderson led the Canadiens in hits. One of them had 7, one had 6. I can't remember which order it was. So they were in the game. They were involved. They were. We're talking about this team not having enough somebody to light a fire with Brendan Gallagher not there. These two guys have tried to do that. Anderson, before the game in Edmonton, he came out and said, we have to play like a playoff game. Enough messing around. It's time to play a playoff game style. And then he went out and did it. He went out and led the team, and he carried the team on his back. The game against Toronto, he threw a big hit behind the Leafs net on one of the Leafs defensemen. These two guys they talked about how much the passion they had for wanting to play in a Canadian market, wanting to play for the Canadiens, wanting everything that was going to come with playing for the Canadiens, and they've lived up to it. They've come out to play every game. They've come out fired up. If they're not scoring, they're doing something, and they're scoring a lot of goals. And thankfully for the Canadiens, they are, because this team without Toffoli and Anderson would be in a real mess this season.
Yeah, it's possible that might be the. I'm still surprised. You'd think they'd be worse than the Ottawa Senators. I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I agree with that. I think the Senators this year, they're not really supposed to. I know that they're giving teams fits. I'm not convinced the Canadiens would be worse than the Ottawa Senators. Maybe as bad, maybe just a step above, but not worse than the Ottawa Senators. We're just going to have to agree.
They wouldn't be in the playoffs, that's for sure, though.
They wouldn't be in the playoffs. I agree with you on that. They did not have either of those players. They would not be in the playoffs. But worse than the Ottawa Senators, I don't know. We can agree to disagree on that. But very spirited conversations on yet another scintillating edition of Hockey Inside Out. If you, watching this video at home, have any questions you'd like to see us tackle, please leave it in the comments section below. And visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out our full episode.